Okay, my friends, this is not for the weak of heart. This is what they found on Mars, and this is one of their favorite pictures. And look at the little strips coming down there. These little bumps. Well, what do we got here? Same, same, same. This is muscle. And I've done catalase tests on it. It's a biological, from a biological creature. And this is as well. And I will show you, let's take a better look at it. Here we go. This is what it looked like when it first came out of the ground. This was where it was saturated with red blood. This is muscle. Get any anatomist. I mean, a biologist, anybody that knows human anatomy, or any kind of anatomy, knows that there's always a tendon attached to a muscle. There's like an abrupt transition where the tendon locks into the muscle fibers, and then you get connective tissue infused with muscle fibers called sarcomeres. I'll show you in a second. This is the area where it locked in to that round area that I showed you before as the bone. One of the pictures didn't have the bone part in here, but this is where the bone ball would be. This is a gluey substance that fuses this area here, which is the tendon, into the muscle, into the bone. That gives you a little bit, just a little bit of tension there. And then you abruptly transition into muscle fibers, and these are the broken muscle fibers. They get real weak after they go a little distance out. They're pretty tough and very, very fibrous until they get a little ways out, and then the bundles just break off. That's what you got here. Bone, the glue, the tendon, the muscle, broken off sarcomeres. Okay, most liked images from Mars 2022. Well, I like it too because I have one here identical. You see that? That right there, my friends, is identical to that right there. Now, we're going to be looking at this as a microscope, and we're going to be making some comparisons, and I would like to show you what they will find when they get to Mars, because they're touting this year as a huge success for NASA, and I would like to weigh in on this, what they will find when they get to Mars. I know exactly what they'll find because I've been watching this since Curiosity in 2014. So let's start off what they will find when they get to Mars. Now, if you need to, go back and look, but remember where that red bloody spot is there. That infuses muscle. Now, what is muscle? Well, here's up on Mars, right here. There's muscle right there. These are sarcomeres. These blocks are sarcomeres. These little strips are connective tissue. They go just like this to make your muscles work. And I'll show you that in anatomical. Now, what are we looking at here? That's the Mars crab. You see all these little legs coming out of here? Those are blood vessels. This is the the vein coming back up to the heart to refuse the blood. Now, this is just nothing more than the red fleshy parts eroding out, turning it into the red planet. This is all muscle tissue. It's all, everywhere you see these sarcomeres. Let's take a look at what a sarcomere is. These are sarcomeres. These are pinched together so your muscle is contracted. These are just loose out. And these are what they erode on these lines. That's a muscle sarcomere. Now this, I believe, was 2014 when Curiosity went up there, and I said, dude, you got biology here, and nobody's ever responded ever. And this is the same biology right here, one of the most liked pictures of 2022, and I have the same thing here. These are the Mars blueberries, which they claim are, I don't know what they claim, to be perfectly honest. They have no idea what they're looking at, and they just are in a mystery about it. However, I can show you exactly what they are. They're the same as the Moki marbles, which are right here, which are interstitium balls. And you say, whoa, Roger, what's an interstitium ball? Well, it's something that was just discovered in the human body. I'm not kidding you. This layer of tissue right here is called interstitium, and these balls have eroded out of it, and that layer is what your body can go and pull and push and pull all these different directions. Now, what does it look like in the human body? Well, here's what it looks like in the human body right there. That's the skin, or the organ that you're dealing with, because everything is coated with, this is like a membrane. Just think of it as a membrane or skin. Underneath that has to be something so that membrane can float around a little bit on that organ or on your flesh. This is what does that. It's a stretchy fabric, fluid-filled spaces. If it goes this way, it goes that way, it goes this way, but it always comes back to where the balls were anchored. And where are the balls? You want some balls? I got some balls for you right there. There they are. And how do they end up? They end up like this. After the giant creature erodes. And they are not only here, they are on Mars. So if they're going to Mars, they better come around to reality, because Mars is not what they're thinking it is. I just showed you that interstitium. These are stretched. These are the balls. This is stretched. This is gathered. So this is probably skin. And these are the balls that are around to hold these straps. And those straps are what makes your flesh come back and forth. I have them in my leather belt. And all hides have them. All skin has them. All flexible interstitium has them, because that is the structure that all the gooey stuff is built around. Alright, this is the Mars Morse code. This is my leather belt. It's got the same exact patterns. And you want to see what it looks like, and the straps that are in it. See, oh, Roger, I don't see any straps. I don't see any balls. Well, all of these little black parts are the balls. All this white stuff in between is fibers. I'll show you their fibers in a second. The reason these all are all flattened is they roll this stuff. When they do tanning, they crush it and roll it and flatten it, and they put chemicals in it, and then they make it into a good, you know, leather belt or whatever, that's exactly what that is. Now, how can I say that there's all kind of fibers? Watch, this is where I have my belt loop. Here's where the belt loop is. You see the fibers? They have to hold the thing together. That's what holds it together, is those fibers. And there's one where you got more fibers, you see? That's all the belt is all those fibers hold these balls, and the balls hold the fibers. That's how it works. And that's all that is right there, my friends. And that is on Mars, and these things are very, very, very large. Alright, I'm going to probably sum it up about here, because I think I've made my case quite well. As you saw my mud fossil compared to one of the favorites up on Mars, if you can see a difference, I'd like to know what it is. I can guarantee you this is the exact same chemistry as this. It's all from the red planet, because it's flesh. Erodes. The red stuff erodes. These are the blueberries. And here's the Moki marbles. They're on Earth. And this is out in Huntington's Beach, I believe, in the United Kingdom. And here's the Moki marble balls. And here's what they look like in the body. In a creature's body. These are little anchor balls. These keep everything can squirt around and come back, and it comes back to where it's supposed to be. That's what you call the Mother Nature. Now, what is this? Those are the sarcomeres. Contracted, extended. And then they run out, and when it erodes, all you end up with is the connective tissues, which we see on Mars as well. Which are all these connective tissues, these sarcomeres. You see it? These are all the sarcomeres. As I just showed you, these chunks right here, they just come in together when they contract. And they have to be fed with a ton of blood. And blood has to come through an artery. And an artery has to have blood vessels in order to deliver it out into the tissue. And a vein has to just slurp it back up to the heart, so it can get recharged. Everything is biology. As far as I can determine, there's nothing that isn't biology. You saw my mud fossil muscle. This is the same thing. It's identical. It's running the red stuff just like it does up on Mars. The red stuff is running out. The connective tissue is still there. I'm not going to try to explain how or why. All I know is the ancient text talked about the Earth being a creature. This isn't millions of years in one picture. This is 15 minutes when this creature died. This is nothing more than membranes and layers of connective tissue, and then you get down into the muscle down here. And the reason it's all these different looking colors and so forth is because of the conditions it was in. Now, I don't know what conditions it was in, but I can tell you what, mine were all preserved because of the Great Water Flood. Now, the Great Hot Water Flood, when Venus almost hit Earth, as Velikovsky recorded. Now, we're going to go into Velikovsky. He's my hero, and Carl Sagan is not. And they're citing Sagan as being the hero of space in Mars and so forth from NASA. Now, NASA has to rethink everything they're doing because they're paddling around in the middle of nowhere and they have no idea what they're doing. I'm sorry, it's just a case of the truth. Now, I must warn you, my hero is Immanuel Velikovsky, who was savagely assaulted by Carl Sagan, who destroyed science and destroyed our discovery by destroying Velikovsky in the most despicable way. Now, this is Bill Nelson, who is the director of NASA. Now listen to what he has to say. There was a philosopher, a historian, a scientist. Well, I disagree with all of those.
A historian, someone who had a great grasp of the future, named Carl Sagan, a scientist. And he said, exploration is in our nature. We began as wanderers, and we are wanderers still.
Well, all I can tell you, he was wandering around in circles, and that's why we are wandering around in circles today.
We have lingered long enough on the shores of the cosmic ocean.
True enough that.
We are ready at last.
Yes.
To set sail for the stars.
To understand.
We have set sail for the stars. Now we're going to reach out to the unreachable stars.
Yeah, well, they're going to Mars without any clue whatsoever what Mars is like. Okay, this is a very interesting e-book by, I'll show you the home in a second, but this is about catastrophism and the collision that Velikovsky claimed happened. He says, the legend has it the world passed through cycles of history, each of which is terminated by either fire or water. But what gave rise to such legends? According to Immanuel Velikovsky, they probably arose in part from events that accompanied the Earth's encounter with a giant comet in the second millennium BC. It was 1500 BC approximately. We were almost impacted by Venus. Now, it goes down through this whole thing, and he's, it sort of says, well, yeah, and he's saying this, and they're saying, oh, he's just taking it in a religious context because of all the religious context he did put it into. Now, I'm staying away from the religious context. I'm just telling you what he said and what they did to him. Now, Velikovsky has never had official backing. However, he was a contemporary of Einstein. They know each other. Einstein finally agreed with Velikovsky's findings and died with Velikovsky's book open on his bed when he died. Velikovsky's never had any official backing from anybody. They hated him, and as well as Carl Sagan attacking him. Nonetheless, he has become very much a cult figure. A cult figure is the way they put it. Not only in the United States, but also in other countries. One hears him compared favorably with Newton, Galileo, and Einstein. Well, Einstein I don't think much of either. Why? Well, there can be no doubt of the amount of scholarly research that's gone into the worlds in collision and its successors. Every literary reference is correct, every one. And there are many of them. In fact, we have a classic case of excellent research being twisted into an eccentric theory. They just twist it and they won't listen to him, and they destroyed him and wouldn't let him speak. And guess who was the leader of that? Carl Sagan. All right, this is the home for this place. Website by Michael Behrend, and he's got a bunch of different stuff. It looks like he's doing a good job. I don't know. This is the first I really ran into him. Anyway, thank you, Michael. All right. As you saw, or I will show you, Bill Nelson is saying Carl Sagan was a great hero. Well, no, he wasn't. He was a professor of astronomy and space sciences at Cornell. They had a very low opinion of Velikovsky, held by most scientists, and he said, where Velikovsky's original is very likely wrong. Where he is right, the idea has been preempted by earlier workers. There are a large number of cases where he is neither right nor wrong, or nor original. I mean, he really, and then Sagan has rewritten expanded his attack on Velikovsky for publishing the book. This was in 1970, 24 years after Velikovsky had this book out. Sagan continued to attack him over and over and over, and then finally they wrote this book, Scientists Confront Velikovsky, and guess what? They wouldn't even allow Velikovsky's information into the book. Yeah, and then they say, oh, we just destroyed him, but they wouldn't allow his information in the book. See? Absence of Velikovsky's participation in the collection seems almost unavoidable because they didn't want it because he had too much information. And it says every single thing that he said was correct. Every single thing that he said. Hold on a second. They talk about all the references, and he had them from everywhere in the world, and they just savagely attacked him until he died. And he would have never been remembered, except I wrote a book about 6-7 years ago or more about Velikovsky and brought him up as a most important scientist in history, destroyed by people like Carl Sagan. So I have no respect for Sagan at all. I'm going to show you how arrogantly dismissive he is. Okay, my friends, I'm going to take a little less combative attitude towards this. It was a long time ago. Carl Sagan thought he was doing what was right by destroying the biggest hero in history. And he did it quite arrogantly and, you know, very, very, as you're going to see, this is basically what you call a two-face type of way of saying, oh, he was well, what do you see? He says, oh, he was just stupid and silly and everything he said was wrong, but they should have been nice to him. And then he just sort of really suavely tries to make it sound like he's really in favor of thinking, but not for somebody like Velikovsky, basically. Here, listen.
There are many hypotheses in science which are wrong. That's perfectly all right. It's the aperture to finding out what's right. Science is a self-correcting process. To be accepted, new ideas must survive the most rigorous standards of evidence and scrutiny. The worst aspect of the Velikovsky affair is not that many of his ideas were wrong or silly or in gross contradiction to the facts. Rather, the worst aspect is that some scientists attempted to suppress Velikovsky's ideas. The suppression of uncomfortable ideas may be common in religion or in politics, but it is not the path to knowledge, and there's no place for it in the endeavor of science. We do not know beforehand where fundamental insights will arise from about our mysterious and lovely solar system. And the history of our study of the solar system shows clearly that accepted and conventional ideas are often wrong, and that fundamental insights can arise from the most unexpected sources.
Okay. First of all, he slandered Velikovsky by saying, oh, just, you know, everything. And he's saying that, I'm sorry, this sort of gets me upset. I can't help it. Let's take it one piece at a time. He comes out saying they should have been nice to him. They should have listened to him. They should have let him express himself. And this was a terrible tragedy of some other scientists. That's the terrible thing about it. Well, guess who those other scientists were? They were him. Okay, as I have shown you, everybody else's world is this. That is not the correct world. That is a false world that they live in. This was a giant creature. We have no clue about our past because of people like Carl Sagan. That's just a fact. Okay, just so you understand, the reason the red planet is red is because that's where the red bloody tissue comes from. These are more sarcomeres. You see the little breaks and all the connective tissue. I think this might be one of the tendon anthesis balls, but there's a very dense bloody region here, and that's how they separate. And then this turns into some other form of I believe this is tendinous material, and then this is muscle sarcomeres. Hold on one second. All right, we know blood is red primarily, and it is literally saturated with iron. There's other metals in there, no question whatsoever, and that's why we can see them in certain conditions where we see them separate. Let me show you how transition metals will settle out in areas where there's so much blood, it's unbelievable. That's why they find the opals in Australia. It's just like one gigantic pile of blood. Okay, this is a twofer. What is a twofer? Well, I am going to tell you about opals, and I am going to tell you about the metals in the opals and how they work and how they bond to create these colors. And what colors am I talking about? Well, here's a heart. All right, that is a regular bodily heart from somebody's donation to you know, understanding anatomy, and we appreciate these kind of people doing that. And I work with anatomists that they do this all day long. They take bodies into little tiny pieces and try to understand what's going on. What you have here is ventricle walls, then you have these little heartstrings, and you have the aorta and all of the different plumbing that's, and valves and all that to support the heart. There's a whole batch of stuff going on up here. Now, these are the, and it basically goes to, like this. It sort of hugs itself, because only blood from the veins can only go one direction. It has valves. And the aorta, I believe, does also have valves in this area. But once it gets into your body, the red blood can go anywhere it wants. Anyway, let's just focus on this particular structure. It just looks like brown looking stuff. It looked like it had a heart bypass or something. I'm not sure what this is. That's some kind of electrode, or well, I don't know what it is. But all I'm interested in is the anatomy of the heart in itself. Now, what is this? Well, that's also a heart, but it's an opal. That was a heart. And it was obviously together, cut right down the middle, laid open. Well, what can we tell from this heart? We can see the ventricle walls take on this particular color. And that has some, it must be some rubberiness to it that makes it want to attach to this color. It could be some, let's just say it's a, well, just think of it this way. There's a chemistry going on in that wall which makes it that big, flexible and hard and whatever it does special. And it wants to find the blue chemical to become stable, and it did. So it became stable. Now, what about this? This wanted to find something else. This is the fascia on the outside. And what about down in here, these little strings? Those are the heartstrings. Well, they're primarily very similar to the ventricle walls. Now, what happened here? Why is this real green looking? Well, the reason it's green looking, in my mind, is it was probably close to bile or some other chemistry other than just strictly blood. Blood has all the transition metals. Now, this was up. All right? This was laying down. This is where it has the green, primarily. You see, this would have laid right over there, yeah, like this, attached here. So, there's very little green here. The green is heavier and was at the bottom. This is the plasma up at the top, the red. So it was that way. Now, I have other hearts here that, these are what they call water opals. They're opals, but they're from a watery condition. Now, let me show you something that's spectacular. Is the Mitchell Hedges skull. It's been dismissed by academics forever. Well, let me tell you something. If an academic does not understand, this is way deep inside this skull. Nobody carved that. You see what this is? These are the fibers and the nerves. You see this right here, this round spot? This was laying on its nose and its face. You see the lip is pushed back and the nose is pushed back. It was like this. I guess that the cerebellum, I believe, is what they call this in the back. It's drifted forward, see it? But look at this. This is all this tangle of nerves here. Runs right up over the top of the head. Exactly, identical. And one up the back. Identical. Identical. Nobody carved that. Plus, the chin and everything comes right off, just like yours would if you separated, you know, and stripped everything down to your bones. It just comes right off the mandible. The teeth are just unbelievable. But that, there's no way in the world they can say that that's not real. Now, that's the same sort of situation as my stuff, or is this one. That's because all of that tangle of stuff in the heart. You don't have all that much. Gray matter didn't. You could see the gray matter. You know, it got a little fuzzy, but it didn't. You know, it's about fuzzy like mine. But this is what this tangle is here. It's just a big tangle of threads and strings and valves, and I mean and that is all different chemistry than what fills in, which is the quartz. In that Mitchell Hedges skull, it got filled in with virtually all quartz. That's what that is quartz. This is crystal quartz. Very, very, very unusual. But you can see the lip twisted back. You see the nose is pushed back. This is exactly, I mean, it looks like it's carved, but it's not. That's what your bones are like. It's exactly like this. And this is exactly what is the nerve fibers. And I have a friend who's an anatomist. He's doing a whole thing about nerves and about vagus nerve and the connectivity between the body and all of the, you know, functions that your body has to do. It's all controlled by your nerves, and there's a whole different universe that goes on in your brain that's separated from the rest of your body, and there's a blood-brain barrier. Only certain things can get into your brain. That's another really interesting place. I got to really dig into that, because I'm telling you, I saw. Well, I'm not going to talk about that. Anyway, this is real, and until they start paying attention to reality, they're just walking around in circles. Look at this. This is an eyeball. That's the strap that holds the eye in position. It's an eyeball. And biology, as you're alive right now, guess what's going on in you? You're dying. Every second you're dying. And the reason you're dying is because you have to do nucleophilic substitution to every single cell in your body virtually every couple of minutes. You need oxygen, you need glucose, you need all those different minerals, you need to take out the waste, you got to send the stuff to your lymph nodes, you got to decompose all the foods and so forth, you got to patrol your membranes and your interstitium and make sure there's no invaders, you got to keep your tight junctions tight, where everything rolls through your body, your lungs and so forth. That's all done by proteins and enzymes and bacteria. There's a whole new universe that has been missed because of dismissal to look at things. And I thank God for that, because I would have never ever continued on to figure out the things I figured out if these people had done their jobs. So thank you for being against doing your jobs. You've done a great service to humanity.